Namaste, viewers. I have Bhavish Aggarwal with me. He's the co-founder and CEO of Ola, and I'll tell you why he's a special guest. I'm very critical of all kind of people because I feel that they are double-faced and they all say something in public and they do something else. And one of the categories I have criticized a lot are industrialists who are actually funding woke in places like Harvard and DEI in their own enterprises and doing lip service to being patriotic Indians. But when it comes to policy making, they're aligned with Western forces that are not very friendly to India. So, but I found that last year, Bhavish and I met online, and we're looking forward to a personal meeting. But what struck me was he was not only open but quite aligned with this idea of woke being a very dangerous thing for society, for corporate people, for India. So I really enjoyed my conversations with him. I think in that sense, he's different from the rest of the industrialists. I look forward to getting to know him better. And I found that he is also able to articulate publicly. So with that introduction, Bhavish, it's a pleasure to meet you here.
Sir, thank you so much for having me with you. And I actually want to say to everybody listening in that, I have watched you, read you, and I've just been so amazed by the clarity of what you say, and actually that we as Indians are not aware of these things. And if I just share, and so you're a hero for me, sir. And I think more and more people in India, especially my generation, needs to understand this thought process, and hopefully with this chat and others, what you are doing already with your foundation in India, we need to really make a bit of a education of people around some of these, I would call broader narratives that creep into India because of multiple reasons, which we will explore today. But I'm really honored to be here with you, sir, and looking forward to our conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's get started. So, the one of the main topics I guess that we want to talk about is that the United States of America, which people think is the most anti-Marxist place, yes, and the most free enterprise capitalism place, because that's how it became great. Somehow, and the reasons are explained in my book, The Snakes in the Ganga, the history of all this, but somehow it's actually become the center of world Marxism today with the ultra left. And they don't call it Marxism, but it is Marxism. And they call it woke, they call it critical race theory. They have different names, which are all kind of a reincarnation of Marxism. Yeah. So combination of Marxism and postmodernism has produced this new kind of a cocktail, which is very dangerous. The bottom line of this is they believe that all truth is socially constructed, which means that even the laws of physics, even the laws of mathematics are constructed by society rather than nature. And therefore, the elites who constructed this are the oppressors, and they have made this society with all its rules and laws and whatnot. And so this has to be toppled in order to free the rest of the humanity. This is a Marxist idea of a revolution to free up the proletariat and to overthrow the regimes and whatnot. So now Marxism has entered a new phase. It's not just economic exploitation they're worrying about. They're also talking about, religion, race, these sort of things that Marx did not want to include. So Absolutely. This wokeism is a new kind of Marxist, described it as Marxism 3.0. Now, its impact on industry and people like you is what we're going to talk about.
Absolutely.
One of the main impacts is that there is now this whole anti-meritocracy. That merit is a privilege that some elites have, and say that you got into IIT and you did well and you got these patents and therefore on merit you are successful. It's all humbug, because really it's your privilege and you are an oppressor and you have a network and you have all these access to special things that the rest of people don't, and so it undermines meritocracy. Absolutely. And first question to you will be, I want you to reflect on, I wrote a book called The Battle for IITs, where, in Harvard, a Harvard professor, actually of Indian origin, wrote this book on the caste of merit, saying that merit is actually a caste. There is a caste called merit. Yeah. Okay. And IITs is the case study. Whole book is on IITs. She went and met people here, there, and quoted data, statistics out of context. And then this became a legal issue. they filed some cases. Some other people took it further, and they
Mm.
filed some legal cases against ex-IITians who are working in Silicon Valley,
Mm.
saying that these people are abusing others and whatnot, and they are privileged.
Mm.
So IIT became a kind of we are proud of IITs, but IIT became maybe Harvard was jealous or whatever it was, but from very high levels of American society,
Mm.
there was an attack on IITs. So I wrote
Absolutely.
this battle for IITs, and I expected more support from the IITians,
Uh-huh.
and privately they have all supported it, but
Yeah.
they have not really gone out and helped me in this project. And I'm not an IIT, and I'm from St. Stephen's College. My field
Uh-huh.
was physics and all that, computer science,
Mm. Mm.
but I'm supporting this as a matter of principle. So I wanted to ask you as an IITian, what do
Absolutely.
you think of this?
Sir, I think you have in your books and even today you've raised a very relevant point. And let me actually step back a little and from a broader perspective, and then I'll go into this. Sir, I feel in my background, if I just share with the viewers a little bit of my background, I grew up in India. I grew up in middle class India. Both my parents live in a small town in Punjab, and both of them are doctors there, hardworking and giving middle class values.
You're
So
from You're from Ludhiana, right?
Ludhiana,
I'm
absolutely.
from Ludhiana. I was born in Ludhiana.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I was born. I was born in Ludhiana. So
Uh-huh.
was my so was my
Acha,
whole
acha.
family. But anyway,
Very interesting. So no, so I was in Ludhiana. I grew up, and so thankfully I feel so lucky that I was rooted into genuinely Indian Bharatiya values growing up, right? And I think that has allowed me and other people from my generation to really think about the future of India and contribute to it. In IIT, when I was studying, I went to IIT Bombay 2004 to 8. I did my bachelor's in computer science from there. Most of my batchmates are in either the US, UK, somewhere in the Western world, and I was one of the few ones who decided to stay back. क्योंकि somewhere दिल से आवाज थी कि यार देश में कुछ करना है और देश को contribute करना है, right?
बिल्कुल.
Now when I look at what my generation's opportunity and ambition is, it is to actually make India both economically developed and build a bridge between our aspirations for the future and our heritage, rich civilizational heritage of the past. We
Beautiful.
don't just want to become coconuts, right? Okay,
Right,
बाहर
right,
से brown or अंदर से white, right?
right.
It will be such a loss for us and for the world actually if India just becomes economically developed without anchoring it into our very rich cultural heritage, right? And when I was growing up, I also studied in the same schools where our history was bent around, and it was not, and over the last few years, as I've read people like you and others, I've realized there is so much more to our civilizational history, which should actually that should be the inspiration for our future. And along with this, what's happening is as India is growing, what's happening in the West is getting into, like you said, some of these politics of entitlement. And I am not a politician; I'm a businessman. But what happens is some of these things come into our social life, not just our political life, and then they come into our social life and start impacting us without it starts very innocently, like something that like you mentioned, IITs. Now IITs are actually iconic educational institutes in India and the world, and I know how hard I studied to get into IIT. I had to spend 2 years of my life without looking at anything else except books. If there is merit in the world, I think it is in IITs. No, I wouldn't even say Ivy Leagues, etc. IITs are the most meritocratic in the world because इतनी मेहनत करनी पड़ती है वहां घुसने के लिए, and उसके बाद once you get in, you're not done. Then it's the beginning. You get in and you realize your peer group is as smart as you or smarter, and you have to work harder to build excellence. And that's what IITs allow. And I think we should, India is also in a journey in our context where this is the time for us to work hard and build merit and build excellence. We can't get embroiled into some of these entitlement philosophies, right? We have to actually let those regions get consumed by this, whereas we have to safeguard ourselves as a society and really build expertise in technologies of the future, right? So that's my point of view, sir. Absolutely agree.
So as a scientific mind, I'm trained, you are trained. Then became a computer scientist, and actually my field was AI, but that was in the 70s when AI was like a dream, nothing real
Yeah,
happening,
yeah,
theory. But we are both products of a kind of training which says there is an objective reality. There is science is science. A certain equation is what it is. It's not a question of that one caste has more access or the truth is different for you and for me.
Yes.
It's not like that.
Yes.
So you cannot do engineering and you cannot do science. You cannot build any technology unless you believe that these laws of nature are absolute and we have to use them. But the whole theory of social construction says that these kind of things have been constructed by the elites and the privileged people. So when you are teaching those laws and those theorems and all the engineering principles, you are privileging a certain community and oppressing another community. This is such anti-scientific, such humbug and nonsense. I am surprised that we don't have this being discussed in all the IIT gatherings and all the pan IIT meetings. I've written this and I've got 10,000 copies to give away, 10,000 copies of my book to give away so that the IITians can read. But it takes IITians to accept them and distribute them. And I find that there's a reluctance. People are saying, "Arey nahi, ye political ho jayega, ye ho jayega." So one of the problems that has happened, I think, is that India introduced liberal arts into the IITs. And these liberal arts, they introduced as a leftist from America. So all the professors who are trained in all these leftist ideas, they came and started in the humanities and so on. So we did not, while India has a rich heritage of our own liberal arts, our Vedic liberal arts.
Absolutely.
But our ideas of society, our ideas of social justice, our ideas of diversity are very rich. So rather than developing a curriculum based on our ideas and bringing those, we brought in, under the name of liberal arts, we brought in American ideas, which are destroying America also.
Absolutely, sir.
Is this an inferiority complex that, we are not confident enough that so I have a difficult time becoming a speaker in an Indian event where they're bringing in my opponents from the West to speak because they're considered more authoritative and they won't even give an equal place on the table at the table. What do you think of this?
Sir, I think you've hit a very important point. If you look at our traditions, and I know you are obviously much more studied in this than me, I'm just discovering it. But look at how we had the space for transgenders in our traditions, or even actually Arjun spent many years of his life in Mahabharat as a transgender, and so many examples and stories which we can relate to from our childhood about diversity, inclusion, acceptance. And not even tolerance, actually acceptance. People say, "Oh, India is the land of a million gods." They say it in a bit of a joking way. How did the million gods come? Because we were accepting of everybody. We didn't, right? It's just that in itself proves our diversity and our cultural depth. Now, but what happens? I feel the young people in India actually have become a little disconnected with our heritage, and we have to probably have a revival or a cultural renaissance of sorts linked to people's aspirations for their future. We have to make it cool. We have to link it to technology development, economic development. And, in India, maybe over the past decades, these two paths diverged. We said, okay, culture you do in your home. We will all focus on economic development. And we will do it in the way by speaking English, blah, blah, blah. But now I think a point has come where the two have to converge. And people like you, like others, have to provide that intellectual leadership to make that converge. And we have probably, especially if I use this to talk about how big tech has actually, in India, subsumed a lot of they've pretty much appropriated us culturally. Where, unlike, let's say, China, etc., we have so far not yet built technology paradigms of the future.
Absolutely. I want to get into that also.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very good point. So,
but sir, how do you feel we can make this, how do you think we make the young people in India connect with our past in a way that they feel relevant to them?
I want to definitely discuss because we are developing a few in our own Chota Mota NGO. We are developing some AI-based products for this very purpose.
Yeah.
And I want to discuss that, and I have it on my. It's a very important topic. But I want to take you mentioned very correctly that we've respected the trans people, all these kind of different diversity people. Now, the difference is that the West is weaponizing them. They made a political vote bank and a political camp, and they have basically the Marxist idea is that to enhance you, to uplift you, you must topple the other people.
Yes.
So So the blacks should topple the whites, the Muslims should topple the non-Muslims, the Khalistanis should topple the Hindus. They're all backing that also, by the way. And the
Yeah.
Dalits should battle the non-Dalits. The
Yeah.
LGBTQ people should battle those who are heterosexuals. So you see, this business of dividing the society into camps and saying that certain people are victims and the only solution is to fight the other people,
Yeah.
rather than raising them, the idea is to lower the other side. This,
Yeah.
I think, is very dangerous, and India has bought into it. India is, and I must say that I was very disappointed, and I wrote this in my book, Battle for this, the whole Snakes in the Ganga book, that Indian billionaires, and I've named Mittal and Mahindra and Piramal, Tatas, all these guys, and in fact, Ambani's also have done it. They funded chairs in Ivy League, which give them prestige, and when go there, they are very big shots and they are looked after and all that. So it's good for PR. But they have not considered the fact that what these chairs are teaching and the scholars they're bringing in, the research they're putting out is so anti-India. They are breaking India forces. So imagine that you are giving your family name and your money to promote something which is actually against you. Now, for the Ivy Leagues, this is brilliant because they can say, this is Professor Hansen at Stanford occupies a chair. He's one of the most anti-India people in the last 20, 30 years. His official title is Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani Chair. Yeah. I mean, he's a Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani Professor. That's the title, official title. So how can the Ambanis not be concerned about it? That how can they, industrialists always do due diligence. They don't invest without verifying and getting reports and whatnot. They should have gotten, all these people should get an independent review, somebody who's a civilization expert, to go and see what is the output of these places, what is good, what is bad, so that the sponsor knows that this is what he's backing. And, when I raise it to these people, they want to pretend they don't know, they want to look the other side. But bhag nahi sakte because their name is on it.
Yeah. But sir, as you mentioned now, with India's growing economic growth, some of these institutional capabilities will also be built in India. So, probably before independence, how IISc was set up by then people, we need to build these institutional capacities in India. And I think looking at how, let's say, the newer generation is looking at it, maybe there's a change in the offing, but we need more awareness for understanding that instead of funding research globally, we actually should be funding ourselves.
Absolutely. So now,
good things are in this direction that's happening is, when I look at my batch, let's say IIT Bombay, many people left India. But when I look at the current youngsters, the people leaving India are much less. So there's more opportunity in India, and the talent is remaining in India. So it's a cycle is turning.
So many good startups, yours being a great example, one of the pioneers, and that's fantastic. Now, the human rights people, international people, are doing a rating of Infosys and Cognizant, and they are rating them for whether these people have good human rights, whether they have diversity. Now, the problem is that these rating indexes are not under our control. And it's like you're playing a game which somebody else has defined the rules. And somebody else has put in the umpires, and they've even appointed some other sepoys, brown sepoys, to run your side. Yeah. Your captain is being appointed by the other side. Yeah. I mean, this is very ridiculous. So, if you look at these indexes, and all the Indian, I want to ask you, how do you feel as an industrialist that the success of the industry of a company often is at the mercy of these indexes, because that will determine your who will invest and who will not invest and things like that. So you need a good ESG rating and a good DEI rating. ESG, the environment part, everybody's will like, but the S part is society. And the society, if you drill deep, it is DEI. It is diversity, equity, inclusion. And then when you drill into equity, people should know that equity is not equality. It is not equal rights. Equity means
entitlement.
It's a quota system. It's an equal outcomes. So you are into this identity politics that X% of the people should, X% of the outcome should go, board members should go to this community, that community. So you're not doing it on merit. And now these DEI people are trained and they are part of every every HR department in the US, at least, whether it's corporate, government, universities, and
Absolutely.
these DI people are trained to bring in certain type of people,
Mm.
and based on identity, and they have quotas.
Yeah.
And you, as an executive, you may not get your bonus this year if you did not meet the DEI quota. The DEI people have to certify that this guy is good DEI. Now you're not running your business based on the merit of the product, and you're not running the business based on the merit of what's good for the shareholders. The job is to maximize shareholder value and to maximize consumer satisfaction. The job is not to satisfy some DEI which is controlled from foreign country.
Yeah.
So
Sir,
what do you
absolutely. So my philosophy is very simple, sir. I believe in the future of India, and I believe Indian ethos is growing, and it is going to define the future of India. And I'll tell you how that is changing the rules on the ground. So, for example, today the amount of capital that's going into India, much more of it is domestic than international. A lot more domestic institutional investors, mutual funds, private capital, family offices are investing into India. So these people don't have DEI, ESG rules, thankfully. So versus a 10-year ago, 20-year ago paradigm where we were much more dependent on foreign capital to grow India. But today there's a lot more. Actually, I think domestic capital has recently exceeded foreign capital in terms of investing into public stocks in India. So that means, as India is growing economically, as wealth is getting generated, we will define our own rules. We will not be dependent on rules imposed from the outside. And also, at least from in my case, when I look at some of these things, I fully agree with you that these agendas are somebody else's political ideology, and we shouldn't engage with it. So, but a recent example which brought us to this conversation, the LinkedIn example that I faced. And this is where I believe we need to actually build domestic corporate technology capacity because, especially when you think of technology has always been used for geopolitical influence, always. It is the definition of technology. If you think of Industrial Revolution 1, the invention of the steam engine, etc., led to the colonization of the world. If you think how global supply chains are monopolized right now by one country or a few countries because their dominance of manufacturing, we need to create these technological depth and supply chain depth in India. And these companies, because they are beholden, the Western companies, they are beholden to their shareholders in the West and their employees, which are largely in the West. They willingly and largely unwillingly, but I feel willingly bring some of these things into India. For example, what happened on LinkedIn, unless I set my pronouns, I will be referred to as they. Right now, that means even for me to be referred to as a he, I have to be engaged with this philosophy of pronouns. And all Indians, 100 plus or maybe 200 million Indians who are on LinkedIn can't do anything about it. Right? So the only alternate we have is to call them out and also build our own alternatives with our own thought process.
Yes. This is what I liked about you. This is why I decided, this would be a very good conversation because you have the courage, the audacity to stand up to people like Microsoft. And I really, I'm one of those. See, I'm a technocrat also, but I quit early, long back. And then in this field, I trained myself in the humanities, our humanities, and understood, then used our humanities to study as my drishti to study their humanities, and with audacity, willing to call out and saying, okay, let's argue, let's look at all the facts. And they are the ones running away. So, we need to have people like you who have the courage, who have the confidence, and who are willing to articulate, write, and able to talk back. Now, I'll tell you something very interesting along those lines, since you've raised that issue of technology, platforms, and so on. In my book, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power, which came out 3-4 years ago, and I had been talking about it several years earlier, I raised this concern that this blindly bringing in Google and Facebook and Azure and all these platforms and putting them in India is a bad thing, because we should be doing like China. China built its own platforms. And now the reason China is so powerful is because they have all the technologies and on par with the United States. And we are a licensee. We are a licensee of all the technologies that US produces. So I actually I coined this term, Google Devta and Facebook Devta and Instagram Devta and all these Azure Devtas, and I mentioned them in my book. And I mentioned I said that this is the return. I have a chapter called "The Return of the East India Company." I'm saying that they also came with technology.
As a company,
And then they created all the zamindar system. So a lot of our industrialists are like zamindars. I even mentioned that in my book. And they're the zamindars of these Westerners. And then they created the next level below, brown sepoys, who were fighting against the fellow Indians. So now we have all these brown sepoys in IIT humanities departments. And in Ashoka University and all these kind of universities, they're really manning the narrative on behalf of the West from where they're trained. So unfortunately, when I came out with this book, actually before writing this book, I'd sent it to a lot of newspapers. They didn't want to publish this point of view because that's when the discussions were going on that Facebook is about to acquire a certain percentage of Geo. And everybody was congratulating. We must be doing so well because, after all, if the Gora Saab like us, we must be good. I mean, we have inferiority complex, but now Gora Saab like us must be good. So I said, look, investment is fine. But if it comes with the strings attached that you must use their platform, then they're actually turning you into a licensee and you'll perpetually be dependent on them. This will be a technological dependence. You'll always, the fast way, the quick way, the easy way will be to use their development tools and just become a developer on their platform. People did not understand. You see, I have this, as a technical guy, long back, I knew the power of the IBM platform. Then the mini computers came. The mini computers had this platform war. Then these personal computers came, this war between Apple and Microsoft on who owns the operating system. And then this whole internet. So it has always, technology has always been two levels. One is the platform and one is the application.
Yes.
So now we are Indian psychology, Indian civilization has become an app on Western civilization's platform. This is very sad. If you really, I mean, you as a techie can understand.
I can understand the paradigm.
This is a big frustration for me. So now tell me, what is being, now let's fast forward. What is being done to create our own large language model? That's the future. So why are we dependent only on them? OpenAI and it takes a lot of money, by the way. As you know, huge amount of money and whatnot. Otherwise, graduate students like me 50 years ago would have developed AI, but there was so much funding and hardware and power and all the memories and all that. So where are we in terms of our own, rather than being a kind of a licensee using ChatGPT type of things?
No, sir, this journey of building our own technology stack, starting with the platforms, firstly, is a super important journey. And if you think of, let's say the comprehensive national power, and like how in India, in the last 10 years, at least, we've started thinking about a broader national power, right? Now, that is really indexed on technology strength and productivity of the economy. Always the country which is most economically resilient as well as the highest productivity is always able to project more power. And it's both government and private sector which has to contribute to it. And that's actually when we see China's progress over the last few decades, 2-3 decades, they've really identified technologies of the future and thought very strategically about taking their place in them. That's what we in India need to do and are starting to do. I do believe the government is really supporting that base, for example, with the PLI schemes, etc. And specifically, you mentioned AI. AI is absolutely the most important technology of our generation of the future. It'll be a journey for us to create the whole technology paradigm in India because especially in these digital technologies, we're starting early right now. We're starting from a zero base pretty much, because while we had an IT revolution, we never had a digital products and technology revolution. And even I have been an entrepreneur for 13, 14 years now, but for truly building world quality, world scale technology platforms, we are making a start in the country. But, if you look at the problem, let's take AI. Now, India generates about 20% of the world's data, but we have only 3% of it stored locally. And most of the data goes into hyperscalers like Azure and AWS and Google.
I'll tell you, sorry for interrupting, but I'll tell you something before I forget. You live in Bangalore. So one of the leading corporate industrial investment type of people, I won't name him, he's also a very dear friend. I remember having a dinner with him, many years ago, saying that data is not secure because you are allowing all these people to bring in clouds and so on. Okay. And his argument was so naive. His argument was, but we've required them to locate their servers in India. So I said that even if I have a server in your basement, the point is if I have access to it, I know the framework, I know how it's coded, I know how I can make sense of it. You, even though the physically you have custody, for you it will be just a bunch of zeros and ones. You will not know how to make head or tail of it. You will not know. So he didn't quite get it. And then I talked to the officials in the government, Niti Aayog people and various people making all these policies, and they always said, "Don't worry, we have a plan. They will have to put their data server here." I said that's not going to solve the problem. It's actually going to make it worse because they're getting in the door. What you need is your own servers that you own, you control, and the form, and how this organized, the data organization, the architecture, the structures are your own, and you know how to make sense of it. So, what do you think of this very common wrong view, in my opinion, that physical location is all that matters?
Sir, I think you need all of the above. You need definitely the physical location, but that's a starting point, not the ending point, right? Obviously, data sovereignty means the location should be in India, but the data control should be in India also, not just the real estate. So we need to have our own cloud technology stack, which controls the data. But most importantly, we need to act. If we, the advantage we have is since we have the largest population in the world, we generate the most data in the world. So if we truly become leaders in this AI revolution, AI is basically using all this data to build intelligence. So we'll become the most intelligent country in the world, just in a very simplistic sense. So we need to domicile our data. We need to control it. We need to mine it, and we need to create our own intelligence. And AI is a very strong tool for economic productivity, but also cultural appropriation. So unless we build our own full stack, starting from AI, the cloud, the data center, and the chips, so that we can reduce the cost of AI, we will not be able to really harness the power for both economic productivity as well as cultural strength of our civilization. So both, and if we start using only other LLMs which are not trained for India or on Indic data, we'll again get appropriated into their cultural narratives, which is exactly what's happening.
Yeah, and the next book I'm writing, which will be out in a few months, and I'll share with you an advanced copy when it's ready, is the Breaking India 3.0. And we are talking about exactly this, exactly how the floodgates have opened in a certain sector where people don't suspect that it's a Breaking India force, but it is. We'll show you how. And in that, they're completely taken over the minds and the intellects of a large community of Indians, which are our future, and also the data mining as a process, as a part of that. That's going on at a frantic rate.
So this is actually something which I fully agree that if you think our inspirations have to move from Western inspired to inspired from our heritage. Like for example, even in the startup world, we see so much inspiration from people in the West or the narratives of the Western startup worlds, like move fast and break things, etc., etc. Whereas in our own Gita, Karma Yoga is such a beautiful philosophy. You dedicate your life to your dharam through the path of karma. Right. So we should look at our own dharmic influences to build our own future individually. But this is something where I feel, sir, the young people, more needs to be done to get them aware of these things. So how do you think we can make that awareness grow?
But on that point, historically, India made the platforms. India made the platform. The Sanskrit was a platform which was taken over. The language, the grammar of all the European languages in the 1700s and 1800s.
All Sanskrit.
They learned Sanskrit and that Ashtadhyayi, and they made their grammars. This is all linguists will tell you. Historians of linguistics will tell you that that's how it is. So language platform, mathematics platform, the steel industry, the old wood steel, the Romans used to call it wood steel, which they got from India because it was stronger than any steel they could
We were the best in material science.
Material science. Yeah. So
astronomy, material science, everything, surgery.
Weapons made of wood steel were the prize, in those days. Then textiles. So, when the industrial revolution happened, the East India Company learned the two big industries that they made Britain great and powerful were steel and textiles. Both they learned from India. Both they learned, reverse engineered, took it back to England and stopped the industry competition from India, and then they could bring it back. So we were the platform makers. We were the R&D people. The rishis are the R&D. So we have become from the knowledge producers, we have become the knowledge licensees.
Yeah.
We become licensee. It's like the Rishi becoming a sitting down and now he has to understand what this guy is telling
Yeah.
him and
Yeah.
Baba, and I'm
Yeah.
so grateful.
But sir, I feel in our in when I look, I feel very optimistic that if we leverage AI technology as at a leading scale in the world quickly, we can actually turn this tide up around, and we can become the knowledge creators. But we'll have to really leverage at scale the technologies of the future, and that's my endeavor actually with my AI company, to truly become, the knowledge creator of the future should become India.
Right. This is very good. Now I want to talk about this issue. The In the last 20, 30 years, some big tech companies became huge in India,
Mm.
renting the brains rather than developing the technology.
Yeah.
Renting Indian brains. And
Yeah.
so our tech revolution was not that we own any platforms and technology. All these guys, tens of thousands who work for Microsoft, we don't own one line of code in terms of intellectual.
I used to be one of them. My first and only job was in Microsoft.
And, and it's good you left and you said, okay, I'll do better than that. And that's a great story. So,
Yeah.
it's like the analogy I give is that poor people come from a village somewhere
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they come to a big city and they become
Mm.
bricklayers, but they
Mm.
don't own even one brick. They make a massive building for some rich
Mm.
guy. And
Mm.
when they're done, they go to another job and another job. They're like outsourced labor. So
Mm.
what we've created is the outsourced labor arbitrage. You can hire
Mm.
people cheaper in India.
Mm.
The value in the United States maybe 5x, and so you build a margin, and the other guy also saves some money, and you
Mm.
become very wealthy. So this is labor arbitrage, sale of Indian brains. Now China did the
Mm.
following also. They were poor and they
Mm.
needed to do labor arbitrage in manufacturing. They
Mm.
needed to, like
Yeah.
we did in services, they needed to do it in manufacturing. But the Chinese government had a policy that out of all the money you make from the labor arbitrage, doing factories and whatnot, two things are important. One is 50% of that profit you reinvest in making your own indigenous
Yeah.
substitute. So when you are helping Apple make their iPhone, you're also developing your own iPhone equivalent. The
Mm.
second thing is steal the technology. So whatever you're now, Indians are running the banking industry in the United States. They're running pharma industry, all the technology, back office, all the algorithms.
Mm.
Indian brains are running a large part of it, but the people who are supplying this labor, they are
Mm.
happy just making their margin and declaring dividends and becoming rich. They haven't considered, like the Chinese, we
Yeah.
should reinvest this, develop our own products, become product rich
Mm.
rather than just service rich. What do you think of
Absolutely.
the irresponsibility? I would say whether it is Infosys, whether it is TCS. I had a lot to do with the TCS. This is another story.
Mm.
I was on the other side, in the American side, and
Mm.
before we were the first client who brought in TCS programmers, and I was the project manager, hired them. This is a long story. So
Mm.
I know TCS, a great company, created a lot of jobs, created a middle class and whatnot, but they should have at some point in time pivoted towards products.
Mm. Mm.
And so should all of these companies. They haven't done that. It's sort of like easy money is you rent the brains.
Yeah,
So
but
what
I
do you
think,
think?
sir, I think the new generation of entrepreneurs that are coming in, right, and I am one of them. You do see a lot of interesting focus on technology and building in India for India. It's early stage right now. The scales are early, but it's growing fast. A lot of ideas for the future are being developed by younger companies and younger generation. But if you look at, I fully agree with your thesis that for us to build a strong country, strong economy, and a strong society, we have to build new productive technologies of the future, and we have to become leaders of that in the world. Be it AI, be it space technologies, be it semiconductors of the future, be it biotechnologies of the future, energy technologies, material sciences, all of these. And India used to be the traditional fountainhead of IP and thought in the world of all
Yeah,
aspects. Sometimes we only think, oh, we were a great culture. We wrote the Ramayana, Mahabharata. We were a great culture. We were a great economy. Yes, but we were also a great technology power. We,
we have a Infinity Foundation in the back here. I have
yeah,
we 14 volumes on the history of Indian science and technology. 14 volumes.
I would love to read all of them.
And I'll get you a set. So this is
Yeah,
about iron. This is about
yeah,
distilling. We were the first to distill metals and make pure metals.
yeah.
It's about
Be it
textiles.
mathematics, astronomy. Our astronomy was so advanced.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
city building, all these ancient architecture and all that.
Yes.
So the idea was
Yeah.
that IIT should be teaching this, but they're not. They're not teaching all this.
Yeah.
They're teaching something else. So we did our work to bring all the excavating
Mm,
this over
mm,
20 years, took a lot of
mm,
effort to build 14 volumes.
mm.
So I think that the heritage is very rich, but not properly
Yeah,
understood
but
by.
that's where we need to build a bridge, sir, between our aspirations of our future, and given that where we are in the current age, where technology, capital, talent matter a lot, and that's the aspiration of young India.
Yeah.
We need to build a bridge of inspiration from our past heritage to drive this aspiration forward.
So
And yeah.
yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and sir, that's where I fully agree that companies, private enterprise, and I'm not just mentioning any single, but all of us, private and industry together, need to really double down on R&D for the future. We, for a generation, need to extra invest into technologies of the future. And if you see, you mentioned China, what China did in the past couple of decades, but also what it's doing now. It's their vision is to own the new productive forces of the future. And we in India need a all of society effort towards that. We cannot, sometimes I feel industrialists and entrepreneurs look too much to the government, and the government can do what it can do, and it's doing a lot in my view. I am a big supporter of what the government is doing with PLI schemes, with other encouragement. But we as civil society, as entrepreneurs, also need to do our bit to really double down and create technologies of the future. Where in India, the typical private company does an R&D investment of, let's say, a couple of points of revenue, 2 points of revenue. In China, the companies do 8 to 10% of revenue as R&D investments. Now we need to do that. So we'll have to have a generation of effort to build these technologies, do the investments, so that we get the productive capabilities of the future.
So now on one of the current affairs in the world is this all this riots going on in Columbia University and Harvard and all these kind of this kind of thing, and students gone woke. And most students, when you interview, they don't know what the issues are. They just know
Yeah.
that this is tamasha. This is like a big
Hmm.
kind of a cult following,
Uh,
emotional. But
uh,
it has been orchestrated, from a central place. There are people like
hmm.
Open Society. There are people like
Yeah.
that who large scale.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I will tell you that Omidyar Network was doing this in India, was planning on doing this in India. We have a whole chapter on Omidyar Network in our
Hmm.
book. I'm glad that the public pressure or whatever pressure it was, they decided not to continue funding in India and they just
Hmm.
gone. And I'm very happy they're gone, because whatever they were doing were investing in very tiny groups, tech groups, stealing all the data. They were
Hmm.
really into data at the village level, at the community level, local level, providing a kind of a virtual government and getting all the data about people's lives and whatever legal, whatever. And then they were training these people as for under the name of youth empowerment. They were actually training them to become anti-India. A
Hmm.
lot of their curriculum was
Hmm.
like that. So we exposed it. So now there are many others like that. There are going on doing. So instead, now the good thing is for the in the US, some of the big Jewish
Hmm.
businessmen decided that they'll stand up and speak out, and they spoke out against Harvard. They're speaking out against Columbia. Now all these intellectual places are on the back foot because these Jewish people have got a lot of clout.
Hmm.
So I was thinking, why wouldn't the Mahindras of India do the same?
Hmm.
And what do you think is the posture of the YPO, Young Presidents Organization members, and NASCOM? I mean, you are into all these.
Hmm.
What do those people think? Why isn't there a pushback from the corporate sector
Hmm.
to give a voice?
Hmm.
There are so many anti-India and Hindu-phobic groups going on in the US and in England,
Hmm.
and Khalistanis in Canada and all that. And so individuals like me in a personal capacity can only do so much.
Hmm.
We don't get support from government. They are kind of weak. Maybe Jaishankar will, after the fact, Jaishankar will make a very good point. He will criticize, push back. But they don't have a proactive model to predict what's coming next.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they're not interested in listening to our model either. So why don't the corporate sector, like in the case of the Jewish
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
why don't the corporate sector also speak out and say that we're not going to support those kind of policies, we're not going to do philanthropy and give donations to those kind of universities, etc., etc. Why
Sir,
isn't there?
I can't speak for the others, and the others have a lot of I don't understand their motivations or their priorities. Obviously, they have a lot of scale in India, so clearly, from an economic perspective, they add a lot of value in the economy. But from my vantage point, sir, I feel as we are growing, especially in these new domains, past is past. I want to build in whatever way I can some future paradigms. So as we build into these technology domains, we really need to make sure we build an Indian thought process into that, and that I am publicly committing whatever I can do in my capacity. I'm not against big tech. India is an open economy, and I believe in the concept of an open economy. But we have to build it from a vantage point and a thought process of growing our national interest, right? And our national interest has needs investment from the world, but needs to be on terms of India. And the good thing is now increasingly, I do feel more optimistic that this tide is turning. Like I mentioned to you, there's a lot more domestic capital coming into India. The average retail investor, 4 years ago, the number of people investing into public markets has grown in 4 years, maybe 7, 8x. So there's a lot of interest of the Indian economic participants, the average retail guy, to provide money. So hence, we're not beholden to only a single source of capital, etc. And we like in our capacity, we are building new technology paradigms, which I do hope other companies in India adopt. Hopefully, we are able to build a make in India, but also make for the world. The beauty of our thought, sir, is that it's not in exclusion of anybody else, right? The beauty of traditional Indian philosophy is that the whole world is one family, but that's not said in a superficial way.
Yeah.
It means let's add value to the world, and that's what if we can create the lowest cost, highest performing AI, which is truly, there's some of these uniquely Indian ideas which are really revolutionizing technology now. Let's take the idea of DPI, digital public infrastructure. It's truly profound, and actually it connects to our roots. Like I said recently somewhere that the true India stack was Ramayana and Mahabharata, which was
Right.
nobody, like Valmiki didn't have IP on Ramayana, neither did Ved Vyas have IP on Mahabharata. Everybody could modify it to their own whims and fancies, and that enriched our discourse.
It's an open architecture.
Yeah, exactly. So open source movement should amplify in India. The DPI movement, UPI is a good example of that, where we have really transformed digital payments through UPI. We need to leverage some of these ideas of DPI, new technologies like AI, energy systems, etc., to really create, 20 years from now, if we become technology leaders in all these new technologies, we will genuinely contribute in a much more positive way to the world. And that's what actually drives me personally as an entrepreneur, that if I can really help drive this new paradigm.
So I have a proposal for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for the last 3 years, we've been playing with AI. Okay.
Yeah.
So at two levels. So the first level is we are using the chat GPT, and we are developing a thing called Ask Rajiv, because people said that, look, we have a lot of questions. You don't have the time. So what's going to happen after you're gone? And so I'm training followers, training people we call intellectual Kshatriyas. But then I said, you know what? We should make an AI system that then I can just sit back and finally retire at I have not been able to take holidays and all that, but I want to finally have some free time. But I need to delegate it to human beings and also to an algorithms. Okay. Yeah. So we started this project called AI, Ask AI, and it hallucinates. We put in tens of thousands of pages of my writings. My writings are exceedingly consistent. So they're not, the consistency is there so that when you tokenize it, vectorize it, you don't get internal contradictions. You don't. That's very important, because if a person has written on wide range of things, that's important, helpful. But if there are contradictions, then the system gets confused.
I'd love to use our AI for this, sir. So if you're building it on ChatGPT, let's build on Krutrim.
I'm coming to that. So we have put in a lot of effort. We have a lot of people. And, I'm helping. We have people who then test the system against what they believe my answer would have been. And so they keep improving the system. This is actually a very important thing. Once we can get it done for me, we can take the same thing and produce it, ask Modi, ask Vivekananda, ask whatever. We could do that. So I'm a kind of a prototype, and we are doing it ourselves, and we'd love to collaborate with you. Now, we came across the following problem, that the ChatGPT, being fundamentally trained on Western discourse, hallucinates. So when you ask a certain question, it brings in some Aryan theory, which is totally different from what I.
So sir, exactly. This is a problem today in the world of AI, especially from a Bharatiya lens. So when I train my Krutrim model also, the challenge is, if you train on available data over the internet, most of it, a very large portion of it, is English data. Not necessarily Western, but English data.
Right.
The true Indian philosophies are locked up in Sanskrit, in Hindi, in other regional languages, and a lot of it is not digitized.
Right.
So we have to actually build a foundational effort, and we are doing a little bit of it, and we're trying to get the whole Indian open community to help build this kind of data resource so that we can train in Indian languages on Indian data. We're also building a lot of capability. Another point important in AI development is uh, it's not just scale of data, but quality of data. So and again, we don't have expert. If we just train on the open web, you will get Aryan invasion theory and all this BS. So we need to have experts, like we need to have Sanskrit experts inside our company. We need to have historians inside our company who can point the AI to the right sources. So whenever you ask it a question about Ramayana, it goes to the source of truth, because the source of truth itself is unfortunately a debated topic in some which we
Right.
have to move the debate out, figure out the source of truth, point the AI to that, and this a Western company will not do. So for
They
example,
won't.
if you remember, Sam Altman came to India and said, oh, you guys can't do it. That's the day I decided I will start Krutrim. Exactly that day I saw his interview, and I said, we don't want a white man burden happening again. We need to build our own technology, but these especially in the Silicon Valley, they will preach, oh, we are going to build it for the whole world, and we are going to make sure it's safe and all of that. If it's truly safe and truly democratic, then 20% of the training data should be Indian, because India is 20% of the world's population. They will
Right.
not do that. So we have to take our future in our own hands.
Right. So here is the second project,
Yeah.
which is beyond my scope financially. Uh,
Yeah.
we started developing the architecture and the whole business plan for a Sanskrit large language model. We
Yes.
have just, okay. And we are looking for people who want to come and collaborate, and we can be consultants to them or whatever. We can work it out.
Hmm.
So what is different about Sanskrit large language model is not just the use of Sanskrit texts, which is
Hmm.
of course very important, but
Hmm.
the language itself has got a
Yes.
different
Structure.
structure than
Yes.
English language,
Yeah.
because the phonetics, the intonations,
Grammar and yeah.
they change the meaning. So
Yeah.
it's also an oral language. So now the future is voice, future may not be
Yeah.
text, people may not have keyboards, people
Yes.
may be no more keyboards, people may be just speaking. And
Yeah.
so as it's a phonetic, Sanskrit is a phonetic language.
Yes.
It's a language. It's where the primary, for a long time, for thousands of years, Sanskrit was not written. They later on started writing Sanskrit,
Mm,
but it was an
mm,
oral language. It was passed
mm,
on orally. So
mm,
the primordial sounds of Sanskrit are also neurological. They have a neurological significance. That is
mm.
why the mantras
Yes.
work,
Mantras
and
work. Yeah. Yeah.
they have a cosmological significance. So we are I have done a lot of research on this,
Yeah.
written about some of the Sanskrit qualities, but now we have a project, and we have teamed up with a lot of Sanskrit scholars in India,
Mhm.
and computational linguistics people, and all kind of AI model building people. Some of the people who actually helped train Microsoft and Apple and all these people 10, 20 years ago on Sanskrit, so
Mm,
that these people could develop translation algorithms, translation, machines,
mm, mm.
which they have now come out with. So I've gotten hold of all these people, and we are now developing what would be, and they now realize that what they did was a mistake. They sold out a lot of this knowledge they should not have.
Mm.
So I'm saying, how about if we come up with a blueprint, a whole
Yeah.
architecture for
A
truly
Sanskrit model. Yes.
Sanskrit large language model, where the building block is not going to be the word.
Mm.
We have beneath the word, the monosyllable
Yeah.
is a better building block, and that monosyllable is phonetic, and
Mm.
that phonetic has many, many qualities and attributes about it.
Yeah.
So the number of tokens will explode.
Yeah.
The vectorization, I mean, this open AI will be kind of a bacha compared to this, but it requires heavy funding and
Yeah.
requires
So
heavy.
this one, I would love to do this with advice from you and others in your network, and I'm willing to commit on this open platform that we would build a Sanskrit LLM, and the advantage of that, while what you articulated, but also in addition, there are so many Sanskrit texts in India which have not been translated. Like
That's
I was
correct.
reading somewhere, we have like maybe 1 million manuscripts in
More,
Sanskrit, maybe
more.
more, and which we don't even know what it contains. It's not in public discourse.
There's one Professor Pingri I used to
Uh,
know,
uh,
university, a Sanskrit scholar. He had his biases, but he was also doing a lot of good, accurate work.
hmm,
He built a build a bibliography of all Sanskrit texts based on what is being referenced, even if we don't have the text, but one text refers to another. See, the
Yeah.
Sanskrit scholars, when they were debating and they
Yeah.
had
They refer to each other. That was the original peer review.
uh, original peer review, the original,
Yeah.
when people say, why are you concerned if they're not referring to your work? I said,
Yeah.
because that is our original method. You keep a continuity. So
Yeah.
when you do a Purva Paksha,
Yeah.
a debate with somebody, you refer to that. So and so commented on this, and his
Yeah.
response was a commentary on that, like
Yeah.
that. So
Yes.
what this guy has done is he built a bibliography, and it's like over 30 million. There are over 30 million texts
Mm-hmm.
of Sanskrit. A
Mm-hmm.
small percentage of them actually exist
Mm.
in our hands, but 30 million are referred
Wow.
to
So,
overall.
a Sanskrit AI tool could easily, a well-trained Sanskrit AI tool where the technology, the tokenizer, the data input for training are all built properly, could really help translate this accurately enough, and bring all of that into for consumption and public discourse in India, which is right now lying unused.
So one of the challenges the Indian government should take on, and I've mentioned this to the culture minister and all that. So far, nothing's happened. Is that a large part of the original archives of Sanskrit palm leaves were taken to Germany,
Hmm.
were taken to England, and they're
Hmm.
sitting there.
Hmm.
Some of the oldest original physical copies of our ancient texts are
Hmm.
not in India.
Hmm.
It'll be a kind of a sad thing for you. Once upon a time, I used to fund the American universities like all these other guys are, but I stopped because I realized the bad
Are
thing.
these in private collections or government collections outside?
Universities and
Okay.
archives and government collections. So at one point, I was funding these guys. I stopped because I've realized I call it feeding the crocodiles. Means you're feeding the crocodile and thinking he'll become like a loving puppy dog, but he'll
Yeah.
always be a crocodile,
Yeah.
and he'll just become a more powerful crocodile. And one day he'll like to eat your hand, even though you're feeding it. So I refer to these universities as crocodiles, that
Hmm.
wrong thing to feed.
Hmm.
So, but at that time when I was doing it, I remember being given a tour by the archival librarian at Columbia University, and he
Mhm.
took me to a basement, and
Hmm.
he said that we have all these crates that have never been opened are ancient India, are texts from India. So I
Hmm.
said, why do you have them here? And he says under the PL 480 program. PL 480 was when India was
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
starting during the
Yeah.
President Johnson.
The shipping of food, yeah, of grains. Yeah.
Decided that a large part of the food will be brought and India paid in rupees
Hmm.
because it had no dollars. So at one point in time, 20% or so of the total reserve of rupees was in the hands of Americans. And this
Okay.
was the Americans said, how do we spend it? There's nothing India exports. So
Hmm.
in India didn't want the devaluation that, suddenly they'll dump the rupees. So it was decided that they'll buy texts, they'll buy statues. So India sold out a lot of the
Hmm.
ancient material which the West is hungry for. And under the PL 480 program, they gave grants to the US government, gave grants to 6 universities. Princeton was one, Columbia was one, like that, and
Hmm.
said that you can go and scholars can go spend money in India.
Hmm.
They can do research, they can bring back things. So a whole production factory started to go to India, pick
Hmm.
up archives from here, there, wherever, whatever it costs, put it in crates and ship it back.
Hmm.
These have not even been opened.
My generation doesn't even know this stuff. Like, I was not even aware of this.
They and they're so arrogant. They told
Yeah.
me, I was so pissed off when they said, "You give us a grant and we'll open it and we'll archive it. We will give you a list." I said, "This you should send it back." I said, "Okay, we will fund if you send it back, and in India we'll create some jobs. We'll create a way to digitize it and catalog it and so on." That has never been done. There are uncatalogued materials in many Western countries.
Hmm.
I know a few of them. And so one of the projects would be the Indian government should put pressure and say, okay, maybe you want to keep the original, although it's
Hmm.
collecting dust and maybe termites are eating it, is
Hmm.
not a good idea, but at least we should have access to scan it.
Hmm.
And the entire British archive should be scanned for. So India should have a project, and this is what I proposed to the Indian Council of Cultural Relations,
So
ICCR.
this is where maybe my peers in the startup community or those who are successful entrepreneurs, newer generation, I'm sure they could easily pool resources and do this. It was something that maybe as I understand more of that, I don't think my generation is even aware of this.
Yeah, yeah. So I have some materials I have got in my few garages. I put boxes to do all this research for myself, but I'm getting old, whether I'll be able to or not. But a whole lot I
You
know
should
what
definitely
is there.
digitize, yeah, and digitize it so that at least we can understand what's inside it, what's
Yeah.
written, and that's our knowledge.
So, there are a lot of these projects that we should work on. So I think we've had a good first conversation
Absolutely, sir.
to, of first of many, I think, where
Yeah.
we've talked about all kind of problems. And I'm so glad to be working with you. You are a nice young person ahead of your time. I think for your generation, you are ahead of your time
Thank you, sir.
because most people in your generation are not even understanding all this. And you are anticipating, you are very quick, you can figure it out, and you've got your heart in the right place. And I'm so happy to see success with people like you and
Thank
lots
you.
of blessings, love, and in any way I can support you,
Yes.
I will want to be there. So I'm coming to India in August.
Sure, sir.
And we should spend some time together, and we will we can have more lengthy discussions on some of these project ideas.
Absolutely,
And
sir. And would love to explore these projects with you. Yeah.
yeah, and meanwhile, keep your X, the Twitter thing going on, hammering out this EI,
Yeah.
and I'm there with
Yeah.
you. And maybe in a few weeks we'll have another conversation because I
Yeah.
know a few other big explosive things are in the works.
Okay.
And when they are there, you should have the courage, because you can do it. You should have the courage to speak out,
Yeah.
and you will actually be appreciated by a lot of the anti-woke Americans. In America,
Yeah,
there
there's
is
a
now.
big anti-movement now. Yeah, because people are seeing the harmful impacts of it.
So only yesterday, University of California, UNC, University
Yeah.
of North Carolina,
Yeah.
announced that they have shut down their DEI department and taken all that budget and given it to the police, because there was a movement called defund the police,
Okay.
which created lawlessness, because all these woke people wanted to defund the police and have lawlessness so they can go and do all the ruckus and tamasha here and there. And so now it is defunding DEI.
Sir, I really believe my generation, which is the younger generation in India, has, I feel we are the Karma Yogi generation, that we have
Yes.
to really work with a very clear dharma in our, and हमारी philosophy में कितना, it's so clear that you work for your dharma, and dharma is not religion, dharma is your purpose, and that which brings balance in your and society's life. So,
आपका जो स्वधर्म है, आपका धर्म है, वो सही है.
Yeah.
सही
So
है.
my generation is the Karma Yogi generation. We have the destiny of really building India with inspiration from our philosophies and building a very developed India. So, and when I read what you say and what you write and listen to what you say, I get so inspired by your guidance, and I'm sure our whole generation needs more of this.
I was I was a little older than you. I was in my early 40s. And I had 20 companies I started in the tech world. In those days, these kind of companies were way ahead of their time. And I was always thinking ahead, so I had them in different countries. And then I had some personal transformation. And that has changed me. And I decided that I'll wind up all this and then spend the rest of my life giving back. And that is my yagna. Yagna is giving back to society. So that is my swadharma being implemented as a yagna ever since. And so I started my foundation, and a lot of people said you should continue, make all this kind of money by now. You could have been ahead of all these other guys. But the point is, then yes, I could have done that, but I would not be enriching myself. The ultimate IP, and if you will, or the ultimate intellectual property, or whatever asset, is the phal of the karma that you do.
Yes.
And it is a repository of sanskars inside you. And this is some kind of a cloud that Bhagwan has made, where all this karmic stuff is deposited. And so that is the asset one can take with oneself. That is the ultimate asset. So I'm happy that I invested in developing that. And when I meet a young person like you who is in that mode, thinking along those lines, thinking of the practical world, the vyavarik world, but also thinking of the bigger society, not just personal, but bigger society, and thinking of the future of dharma itself, then I'm extremely happy. And that is why we are having this conversation, and we should have more.
Thank you so much, sir. And I look forward to engaging with you more. And when you're in India, look forward to probably doing a bigger chat in a public forum. I can, we'll put something together.
We'll do something. Okay. All the
Thank you
best
so
to you.
much, sir. Thank you.
And namaste to you and to all the people who are watching. So follow this young man, and in whatever way people can support, you should do so, because he's on to the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Namaste.